Hey guys, tonight we have a very special guest. For my Catholic audience, there's no introduction needed. This is Church Militant Michael Voris. We're going to talk about the importance of this upcoming presidential election. But for my friends and family that are non-Catholic, I'll give you a little background. Michael's a 4-time Emmy-Award winning news anchor, former news anchor from CBS News. He was also a news producer, did many things in the secular news business before coming back home to the Catholic Church. And now he is probably the most powerful voice in Catholic media. So it's really an honor and a pleasure to interview him tonight. A lot of my subscribers have sent me, a few subscribers sent me nasty letters and said they're going to unsubscribe because I went political. I've always kind of kept this a religious channel, so to speak. And I basically, for the past few years since I've come home to the Catholic Church, after being an evangelical for 30 years, I've been defending Catholic teaching against Protestants' attacks. And that's been my focus on this channel. Our brother Michael's focus has been protecting Catholic teachings from Catholics. Sadly, funny if it wasn't so sad, but he's been standing up for Catholic teachings and he's been taking arrows every day. I've been getting a lot of pats on the back. So, this is the times we live in. But before I get started, I just had to make a quick announcement. There's a new drink that's available at your local bar. It's called the Democrat. After you pay the bartender, he gives it to somebody else. I had to use that tonight. So with no further ado, I'm going to go right to the heart of the question. I have tons of questions, and so much has been hitting the news this week. I'm just going crazy what to ask you. But I'm going to get to the heart of the matter. Why is this election the most important election of our lifetime, especially if you are a Christian, and especially if you are a Catholic Christian?
Rob, first of all, thanks very much for having me on. Hi to all of your viewers. It's a very easy question to answer. For decades now, the diabolical has been pushing and pushing and pushing in every realm, not just political, cultural, entertainment, everything. But political matters, not for the sake of politics, but political matters because this becomes sort of the governing agency of the country, of a nation, of a people. The laws we pass, how we enforce them, all of those things, every single one of those is a moral choice. And because of that, the diabolical is very much involved in that. And so to this point, here we are, right on the very cusp. We could not get closer to the end of not just a nation, as we understand it, know it, and have lived it for all of these decades, and those of us who are 40, 50, 60 years old. But beyond that, it's also a question of the end of a civilization. We're here at Church Militant. We hear all the time from people all over the world, good, faithful Catholics, good, faithful Christians, people who aren't Catholic, but they're still baptized and believe in our Lord and all of that, that you cannot fail. You cannot, America, you cannot fail in this election and let socialism, Marxism, communism, which is what all of this is, knock down America. If that happens, that's the last domino to fall, and the whole rest of the world is engulfed in this. Poland isn't able to stand on its own in the face of, the American, what would become the American communist aggression. Brazil, all of these nations, Hungary, they would have the weapons of American economic might. They would be weapons at that point turned against them. And the world would plunge into a massive dark age all around the world. So why does all of this matter? Because truth in that sort of situation doesn't have enough room to breathe. You have to open up a space in culture to allow truth to be discussed and dialogued with and all of that. No one on the other side cares about truth. They hate truth. They pretend to care about truth, but how much can you pretend, or how much can you care about truth when you murder 1 million children a year in the womb, when you bless and sanctify anal sex and call it marriage, when you are willing to take the little joke you cracked at the beginning. I mean, it's funny because it's true. All humor is funny because it's related to the truth. They take your stuff and they give it to somebody else, and they call you a racist, a homophobe, they call you names, they demonize you. This will become the way America, the new America, the transformed America, begins to operate. And we already see this. I mean, you know, there's that progression, little by little by little, that is now picking up steam and gaining steam. And it is right on, I mean, there's this great boulder sitting on the top of a point, and it's huge boulder, and it's rocking one way or the other. This cannot happen here. If it does, every single person who has a living memory of what America used to be like, throw those memories away. Absolutely throw them away. If you don't think they're not coming after your children and forcing them into a certain they already do this. I mean, Planned Parenthood's in the schools and all that. You think they're going to let you sit home and be sort of like a little quiet rebellion in your homeschooling? They'll outlaw homeschooling. They'll find another reason to shut down your churches. You'll be labeled a federal law will be passed explaining what hate means. Because right now it's just this ambiguous term that, you know, if you just don't agree with me, you're a hater. Well, they'll have to codify that in federal law. That'll give them an excuse to come after you on this, that, or the other, shutting down your businesses. And we see all this. So let me think about the baker in Colorado and the florist in Oregon and all. You've already seen little bits and pieces of all of this. The only thing that has prevented them from advancing farther has been essentially this kind of American mindset of fairness and all of that. But if America goes, 50.1%, it's lights out. On everything, it's lights out.
Wow, that's powerful. Now, I used to always wonder how a country like Venezuela could so quickly go from being rich and free to poor and totally socialistic, communistic. And I watched the court packet in Venezuela, and the court packet the Democrats are talking about to now is so reminiscent. If they add 6 socialist judges, whatever unconstitutional law the Democrats pass and a Democrat president signs, the socialists in the Supreme Court will say, no, that's constitutional. So we could have a dictator for 20 years if the Supreme Court that's packed, and Joe Biden will not deny that he'll pack it, they can say we can have a dictator for 20 years.
Sure they can.
Are they actually making a socialistic move like Venezuela on our country?
Absolutely they are. Absolutely they are. That's the point. Nobody grabs power unless you happen to be kind of some lame Republican. Nobody grabs power and then doesn't use it. What's the point of the power if you don't use it? And Marxists always use their power. Always. Because the goal of their power is to increase their power so they can do whatever they want. You've got these lame, wimpy, like Paul Ryans and the whole, not necessarily Rhino crowd, them too, but these just sort of weak little conservatives who are all part of the swamp, who are sort of, shall we just say, lacking in testosterone. They look across the table and they think they're in some sort of dialogue with Nancy Pelosi. They think they want to reach some sort of compromise with Charlie Schumer because, Chucky Boy wants to, just sort of reach a common ground and a middle ground. All of that language is pure BS. It's BS. It's on their part to fool, unsuspecting, naive people. They don't want to compromise with you. They want to kill you. They don't want you around. These people are Marxists. They are communists. There's no difference in this election than there was in the 1933 elections in Nazi Germany. Remember, those people voted in Hitler. He didn't like storm the streets and take power. But when he got power, he quickly eliminated all of his opposition. And anybody who thinks that can't happen here is purely naive. Every single evil regime has as its master, right behind the scenes, Satan. Because Satan's goal is to crush the truth. He hates humanity, and he wants humanity destroyed in torture, in pain, in distress, in despair, living that way. And if a government can impose it from the top down, hey, all the better. And this is the run of human nature. This is what happens. You have evil-minded people who give themselves over to evil. They may not think consciously, oh, the diabolical and the demonic, and we go worship Satan. They don't need to think consciously like Satan doesn't care if they come up and offer something to him. He's got their soul. He operates through them. That's all he needs. And he's set about to wipe out any vestiges of any kind of environment, whether it's the family on a microcosm level, a county, a city, a nation, a culture, a civilization. He doesn't care. If that civilization or any of those steps below, if any of those things allow room for truth, for wonder, for awe at the divine, and to contemplate the supernatural, he wants it wiped out. And he is right on the verge. I mean, you cannot look at any civilization declining and not think about how things are happening right here in America. If Joe Biden wins, every single thing we have understood as America will no longer be here. It will just be a matter of, they have to pass the law, they have to pack the courts, they have to give statehood to D.C., they've got to get the right, bump up their numbers of senators. There will never be an opportunity again for any sort of conservative candidate to win. And once they get that kind of power, if you think they're just going to have a normal election and let themselves get voted out of power, this is what they're talking about. So why they want to vote, they want to pack the court, they want to pack the Senate, they want to pack the House of Representatives so that conservatives will never have an opportunity again. The numbers will be too great to overcome. Yeah. Let me just finish one point here. Think about Amy. 50 years conservatives have been trying to get back the high court. 50 years we have been doing this. Since 1976, election after election, we've been betrayed oftentimes by some weak-willed Republican president who put a loser on the court, who looked conservative, and then he flipped. This time, it looks like you'd got a 5-4 majority, and then if Roberts, ever seems to get off whatever drugs he's on, he could move over and make it a 6-3 court. But in either case, 5-4 or 6-3, it's conservative. Think about the countless millions of hours, millions and millions of hours on every level, city, state, federal, all these races. People have poured their hearts and souls, their lives into getting to this point. And here you can have it right there. She gets confirmed, last week of October, there's election. And then if Biden wins, 2 months later, he comes in, they pack the court, and a half a century of efforts completely wiped out because in the first week they throw 8 more judges on the court and it's over. And it will never be possible to go back and retrieve that again. It will never happen. You'll not only have abortion, you'll have forced abortion, paid for abortion, taxpayer paid for abortion. There'll be no end to it. And that's just one thing.
You're right. They'll use climate change as their reasoning to force no more than 2 children.
Absolutely. You got too big of a carbon footprint.
But let me ask you this. With all your experience in news, I drive around the state of Florida. I'm a truck driver. I drive the whole state. And for every Biden sign I see at least 50 Trump signs.
Amen.
There is no way Biden's going to come close to winning the state of Florida, which is key to his victory. The polls only have Trump up by 3. Some of the polls have it a dead heat. Do they purposely? You're an insider. You're a CBS news anchor. You know what they're doing. Do they do it on purpose, or are they just that dumb and don't understand the nature? People have changed. The people in the public have changed. They're not just old-fashioned Republicans that check the boxes. These are regular, hard-working, blue-collar, common-sense individual that see firsthand, and that didn't trust any of it. My dad never voted. He said they're all crooks. My dad never voted his whole life, 71 years. A lot of my friends were like that until Trump. Guys that have never voted had to go online and figure out how to register and vote. Are they just not accounting for these men, or are they purposely skewing the polls, knowing they can manipulate the polls in such a way to suppress the vote for us guys to say, he's not going to win, I'm not going to bother voting?
You're looking for a suppression poll is what they call those when they put up these enormous numbers, Biden 90, Trump 10, so don't bother voting. I mean, those are all they're phony polls, whether they're intended to be phony or not. There's a little bit of wiggle room here on this question. and just so your audience knows, I didn't just work in news, but in this particular question of polls, my first job out of Notre Dame, I graduated in '83. I went and worked at CBS News in New York. My parents had a friend there, got me a job inside, and I went to work on one of the first assignments I had was to work on Campaign 84, which was with Reagan, the Reagan-Mondale race, the greatest electoral college wipeout in U.S. history. Boy, it'd be nice to have those days back.
I would love that.
One of the jobs I had was I was in the elections unit, and there was a fellow there by the name of Warren Matofsky, and Warren Matofsky is sort of the godfather of all of this political polling. So I kind of learned at his feet, a bunch of us all learned at his feet how to do polling and what the thing was and all that. I can tell you that what I learned back there 30 years ago, going on 40 years ago, is not how polls are conducted today.
Wow.
There was a model that you make and you say, okay, in the last 3, 4, whatever elections, however far you go back, at the beginning of the campaign season, you sort of you produce a blueprint of what the model is, the framework is going to be of how you're going to conduct the poll. So, you study an awful lot of stuff before you ever do a poll. Has there been any sort of, since the last election? 4 years is a lot of time. People move around based on, a bunch of things. They got a new job, somebody died, they left, they retired. I mean, there's all sorts of millions of reasons people move around. How much has the demographics shifted? That's the very first thing you have to ask, because obviously, right now anyway, unless Biden wins, it's an electoral college thing. So that's what you want to study, not just how many people across the country say they're going to vote for somebody. That's not even a question. So you dive into each of the states, at least what you project as the states, and you determine, oh, this state is really close. Things have changed. A bunch of Democrats have moved out of this state and they've moved into this one. Has that turned this state from red to purple and the former blue state to purple? How does it work? You have to ask all of those questions. What's the likely voter turnout in any given state? What's it been? What are the registration numbers going on? Now, see, Florida is an interesting case, and I'm glad you brought it up, because Florida there has always been in voter registration a pretty significant lead that Democrats have had. There's just always more Democrats, at least registered to vote, in the state of Florida. And each year people, both parties go out, and each election cycle people go out and try to get as many people to register for their party as they can. What's interesting is the gap has closed massively, significantly, between registered Democrats and registered Republicans in the state of Florida. Whatever the Republicans did on the ground over the last year to 18 months, man, did they rack up the voter registrations. And I think that's why you may be seeing, as you're driving around, you may be seeing all of these different, the massive Trump support, the yard signs all over the place, because the Republicans got on the ground there and really, really did. I believe the voter registrations the difference used to be about 400,000 more Democrats registered than Republicans. Wow. That's now down to a gap of just 100,000. And people have to come out and vote. That's the other thing. You don't really know what is going to be. That's why, as a polling agency and a media outfit and a campaign, you're constantly measuring voter enthusiasm. How excited are you to vote? Well, there hasn't been a time this entire campaign, back to last summer, where, both levels have increased in their enthusiasm, but the Republicans have always held somewhere between a 6 to 12 point lead gap in voter enthusiasm. Yeah, Republicans are much more enthusiastic about going out and voting. So when you look at the polls, if all of that stuff, and so you don't know that's the problem. You don't know what the background was, say, CBS News, New York Times, what background they did on the poll. And if you don't know those answers, it's kind of hard. You just see the numbers and you say, well, they queried more Democrats than they did Republicans, or independents, or the numbers don't seem to match. Or what are they using as their model? Well, if their blueprint, it's like building a house. You have to have a blueprint. You just don't build a house. Sometimes it looks like, when you look at some of these polls, they just built a house and sort of made it up as they went along. So it's hard to tell if it's intentional or stupid. But you figure if it's stupid, and just kind of naively stupid that every now and then you'd produce a poll that showed the opposite results, that Trump is winning by 30 points. And you never seem to see that. So my gut, it's just a gut, but my gut is that these are intentional suppression polls where, you know, you throw certain things out, and your audience, especially the politically astute ones, will remember back in 2016, it was probably about 10 days, 2 weeks out before the election, there was an ABC News Washington Post poll that came out and showed Hillary with a 12-point lead. And everybody went, whoa, what the hell? All these polls are like 2, 3, 4 points up and down, you know, Trump +2, you know, Hillary -3, whatever. And all of a sudden this like spike out of nowhere, like where the hell did that come from? And then when you dove down into the poll, you click on it, go all the way down, read the very bottom. They'd interviewed for the poll twice as many Democrats as they had Republicans. Well, duh. So, you know, that's pretty, and they retracted the poll. They just took it down, and it dropped out of the Real Clear Politics average. They took it down and said, oh, no, we made some mistakes. Well, yeah, you made some mistakes. Were they deliberate or stupid? They always seem to be stupid in favor of the evil.
Yeah, one way, always stupid in one way. The one poll that seems to be the most accurate over my years of, you know, watching politics is the Rasmussen poll. Would you agree with? He seems to be the closest at any of them.
Yeah, there's two that I pay real close attention to. Rasmussen is one, and the other one is the IBD, Investor Business Daily. Okay. That one was actually almost in a dead heat for Rasmussen in 2016. Wow. I will tell your audience what they need to start looking for is roughly 2 weeks out, which will be next Tuesday. Hard to believe. They'll start doing daily tracking polls. Okay. And a daily tracking poll it works. They take a 3-day rolling average, and they'll tell you about it on one day. So if you hear something on Thursday, a daily tracking poll comes out and says, you know, whatever, you know, Biden's up by 2. Nationally, these aren't done state by state in battleground states. They're just national. I'll tell you, if Biden has a national lead of 2.5 or less, Trump will win, because California has so many voters over there.
That was stole my thunder. That was the question I was going to ask. So when they do the national poll, they're averaging in California, New York, Illinois, where they're up by 20, 30 points. So if you're saying
there's just more voters there. I mean, you know, it isn't a national election. It's 50 individual state elections that all just happen on the same day. And because of that, you need to pay it. So, of course, I mean, if you're going to just call people, of course, the people you're going to call more people in California, because there's more people in California. But you have to make sure that, and see, if a poll hasn't taken all that into account and hasn't sort of baked all that sort of thing in, well, we don't run a national election, so why do you care what a national poll says? Now, look, if Biden's up by 15 on a national poll, well, that means some of those battleground states, provided the poll is honest, some of those battleground states have been lost. You can't have a 15-point lead. But if you're in that margin of error, 2 or 3 points, and then you consider and you bake in that you know, there's the kind of quiet, you know, Trump denier vote. They're going to vote for Trump, but they just don't. They just say, oh yeah, I'm voting for Biden for, you know, all the reasons, to deliberately screw up the poll, or, you know, they just don't want people to know because they don't trust the person or whatever. So when you look at the poll across the whole nation, it's really if it's within the margin of error, it's completely pointless. So a daily tracking poll, what it does, and most of the time they're national polls. It's a poll across the nation. They'll take Monday, they'll sample people on Monday, and then they'll sample different people on Tuesday, and then they'll sample different people on Thursday. They'll average those 3 together, and they'll publish them on Thursday. Then on Friday, they'll look at Tuesday's numbers that they already had, and Wednesday's numbers that they already had, and they will sample for Thursday, which they had not had, and they'll release that on Friday. So it's every 3 days, but the last 2 days are always, you've already got the results on them. So you start to see this kind of somewhat evening out of things, because every poll, every day they release a poll, 2/3 of that poll, the data was the same from the previous poll. bowling along like that. That's why they call it a daily tracking poll. And if you start to see 2, 3%, 2, 3%, one way or the other, 2, 3%, it means it's a tie. And in one level, if you see it around 2 or even less, well, that's great news for Trump.
And then with everything going on, things are changing so quick every day. I believe God is exposing so much evil. So yesterday there was the Hunter Biden computer they found.
Right.
In a text where Hunter Biden said, we got to give Pops 50% of our take. That's more than the average mob boss gets. I'm from Jersey. I was never in the mob, just for the record. But
I don't look like a mobster to me, Joe. I don't know about that. Joe Bob, you look like a mobster. I'm like, I don't know. So the mobsters are always the ones who say, I wasn't a mobster. So I'm just saying.
But the mob bosses don't even take 50%. So he's a godfather. He's not just a capo. He's a godfather, this guy. Yeah. And then today, I don't know if you've seen it, it came out, Peter Schweitzer is reporting that totally separate from that computer that Giuliani got, totally separate computer, a guy in jail, one of Hunter Biden's partners, said Hunter Biden's just as guilty as me and turned over 26,000 separate emails proving that Hunter Biden is as corrupt as this guy sitting in jail. Then I'm Googling all his partners and I see Whitey Bulger, so for people that don't know, big Irish mob boss from Boston, made a movie, The Black Mass, with Johnny Depp. Great movie if you like drama. True story. Whitey Bulger's son, a mob boss's son, is Hunter Biden's partner, and this isn't news somehow. And John Kerry's, what is it, his stepson or his son-in-law is another one of the partner. And somehow this isn't news. Can you imagine if this was the Trump kids? This would be 24/7, right? So the news is they're going to be forced to show this, right? Am I just naive, or are they going to be forced to have to report? Because right now they're really not, other than Fox and talk radio, no one's really reporting this, and New York Post. But are they going to be forced to report this?
I mean, when you have something like subpoenaing some of the tech giants, for example, which is supposed to happen.
That's nothing I want to talk to you about.
Like next week, I believe. I might have my date wrong there, but I think it's next week.
Now they're back.
That becomes a news event that the lying, diabolical bastards in the mainstream media can't ignore, because it's a happening event and it's a political event. Now they can report it happened, and then they put their spin all over it, and they lie and they shellac over it, and they bring every expert on, Chris Cuomo and Don Lemon to sit there and tell you how it's evil and it's just all a bunch of farce and all that. But they have to talk about it. Okay. And when you have President Trump going around saying it, I mean, this is going to be widely talked about because they're on the campaign trail, and Trump's got like 5 stops this weekend. Yeah. He's going to say this at every single one of them in front of tens of thousands of people.
He's by far our best defense of this country. Years ago I was in the Navy, but when I got out, I trained with some ex-Marines, some close quarter combat, and they were called gutter brothers because the style of fighting was called gutter fighting. Nothing you learned you could use in a sport. Even UFC would be banned because it's just dirty fighting. And the Democrats know how to fight in the gutter.
Yeah, they do.
Trump, we've never had a guy that was willing to go in the gutter and fight with them. And now they're like, oh my goodness, he's a gutter fider. Well, that's the only way you can fight you guys, because, we're not going to put boxing gloves while you're kicking us in the groin and poking us in the eye.
Exactly.
That God has given us a gutter fighter.
Yeah, he has.
He is our best defense. And I kind of think, maybe he's like a Constantine who God brought up to save the church from getting thrown to the lions.
Just took the words out of my mouth. In September of 2016, I do a daily commentary, video commentary called The Vortex. And in September of 2016, I made that very comparison that Hillary was like Diocletian, the last horrible, persecution of the church. And I mean, they're different time frames, but and then Constantine just rolls on the scene, and I think there's a something to that. But here's the great $64,000 question. there is much evil in America, and the largest portion of that evil is the acceptance of the evil, the indifference towards it. Even speaking as a Catholic, the fact that the Catholic hierarchy just keeps its mouth shut about abortion is the single greatest individual evil probably in the history of mankind, when you just look at it from a pure numbers perspective. But from a spiritual perspective, not only are you destroying life, but you're making mothers into murderers. You've built an entire industry, a commerce around dead children, hacking them to pieces, taking their organs, selling them for, research and this and that, and cell lines, and just the whole, this is more ghoulish and monstrous than anything that could have happened in Auschwitz or Dachau or anything. That went on for 5 years, barely. This has gone on for nearly half a century. And when you multiply it around the world, we go on here in America about 1 million children being murdered a year. My goodness, when you add it up across the world, it's 50 million children aborted across the world every year. It's just fun. Billion children have been murdered around the world since Roe v. Wade. Obviously not all American. Our count's only 60 million. We've only killed 60 million children. And, so you look at that, just that one evil. There's hundreds of evils, of course, big evils across the world, across the United States. The corruption in government, the D.C. swamp, that D.C. swamp has caused the vast majority of these horrible evils that impact people on the lower economic scale. And I'm not talking about the COVID and just, shutting everything down, and all the poor people, or, people who are on the lower end are the ones who get impacted the most. I'm talking about the whole thing. What have they done? The Great Society. What did the Great Society do? It destroyed the African American community. It rewarded out of wedlock pregnancies and births. It destroyed any sense of masculinity, wiped out the spirituality. I don't even know if we even use the term anymore, Negro spirituality, or Negro spiritual, with reference to music. The African American community used to be just completely rooted, grounded in its spirituality. Where is that? That doesn't exist anymore at all. They've wiped all of this out. We can talk about the Protestant Catholic thing later. I'm just talking about the sense of community and family and all of that stuff that was part and parcel of the African American community forever. All the way back to the very beginning of their presence here, and all of that's been wiped out by a corrupt government of Republicans and Democrats, mostly Democrats, but Republicans have certainly joined in on it, not done anything. You look at all of these evils across the board, and then you say, okay, so you're God. Say for a moment you're God. How are you going to correct this evil? Because you can't let it go on forever. It devours souls. So how do you let this come to an end? Do you let sort of the natural course follow in your permissive will as God, and you just let the society and the civilization, like the Roman Empire, like 22 other civilizations, just completely implode on itself in all of its evil? Or do you give people like us, your viewers, many of our supporters, that whole crowd of faithful, believing Christians, do you give them, having used these 4 years as a giant wake-up call to the evil that's present in the culture and the church, predominantly the church, do you use these 4 years as a giant wake-up call to say, now I'm going to give you a reprieve, one more reprieve. You have 4 years to fix this. God knows how we would respond to that. So, he obviously is outside of time, so he knows not just what will happen, but he knows what might have happened. To God's mind, to the mind of God, the world of possibilities that never came into existence in reality, they're real to him. He knows what would have happened if the 1968 Mets would have lost the World Series. He knows. He knows all this. Well, he's infinite. There's nothing that he doesn't know. So as all of that unfolds, and we look at this from a spiritual, because ultimately that's all that matters, a spiritual context. We have to play it out in time and politics and culture and nations and laws and customs and traditions and all of that. But it's all spiritual at the end of the day. So which way would this go will reveal something to us of the mind of God. And of course, and the mind of God, I mean the will of God for every one of us. Nobody gets to heaven. Nobody is saved who does not correspond their will to the will of God for them. So are we $1 late, a day late and $1 short here on Saving Western Civilization? Or is there one last glimmer of hope that our Lord will give us, knowing that when we have this, we'll be able to make some sort of advance to roll back this evil? That will depend entirely on what he knows we would commit if we get those 4 years. Those 4 years will be absolutely useless if we squander them. So why would God give them to us? That just becomes an opportunity to take a grace and throw it back in his face, which becomes sinful at that point. So, is there going to be some effective resistance and pushback to the great evil that has already engulfed the world? Or is God going to just let the dam break and have it all rush in, because at this point that's the only way to bring about change? Because these evil empires eventually collapse on themselves. They have to, because evil cannot sustain itself. I guess we'll know in 2 or 3 weeks, if the election needs to go on a little bit longer, because in Pennsylvania and this and that, there's more counts. But look, we're going to know at the bare maximum, or the maximum, we're going to know certainly before January 20th. We have to know. So
I think if he wins overwhelming, and that's what I'm praying for, an overwhelming Reagan-like victory, they'll have to concede on election night. That's my prayer. And the Bible promises us, if my people humble themselves and ask for forgiveness, he'll heal our nation. And that's my prayer, that we all, me, you, every Christian we know, whether Protestant Christians out there that listen to me or Catholic Christians, we need to humble ourselves. And like you said, Michael, the greatest evil is accepting this, and say, God, examine me. What have I accepted in my life? What have I accepted in my community? And forgive me, except for the grace of God, I'm as evil as the evilest person in the room. And God, forgive me for allowing this evil. And my hope is God will hear our prayer, and he will heal our nation. Trump will win in a landslide, and we'll be rejoicing the next time we talk and I come on your show.
we certainly hope so. I want to say for your, certainly for our fellow Catholics, but even people who aren't Catholic but are still baptized Christians, we have the Rosary as Catholics, and I know some Protestants are like, oh, no. Just so you know, people who are not Catholic but still baptized, all this is a meditation on Scripture. That's all it is. It's a meditation on Scripture.
Yeah, I've been trying
That's
to
all it is.
There
are millions of these rosaries being offered all over America, other parts of the world also, but just the intensity. We're in the middle of a 54, well, not in the middle anymore, we're approaching the end of a 54-day rosary novena. And by the way, that's not a prop for this talk. I have this in my pocket everywhere I go. It's my father's rosary he gave to me just before he died. God rest his soul. There are millions and millions and millions of these being prayed specifically for the nation, to forestall or beat back or heck, defeat this tsunami of evil coming to us. I'm telling you, if they win, it will be the end of America as we know it, and it will probably not be too long. Look at the rage of the summer. All the burning down, and Kamala, they're like, oh, these riots need to continue even after the election, and Joe just never saying a word about it, and all of this. They will use violence. They've already used lies, deceit, censorship. There is nothing off the table for these guys. Remember, they kill babies. Nothing is off the table for these guys. They have killed babies. They climb over mountains of corpses of innocent children to hold on to power. They are modern day King Herods. And if anybody is sitting out there thinking that they wouldn't kill you in a heartbeat if they had to, then dude, you're smoking crack, because that is exactly what they would do.
Amen. I think you're 100% on point. And I just want to tell anybody watching, if you want to keep up with this, his channel, The Vortex or Church Militant, he, like I said, this guy has the inside scoop, 4-time Emmy-Award winner. So you're getting real news. You're not getting fake news with this guy.
No.
So I recommend my people to watch him. I'm going to stick, I stick mostly to theology on my side, telling people why I left evangelicalism. That's my call. But right now, we got 2 weeks until the socialists take over our country. If they take over our country, you only got about 2.5 weeks. So I'm putting everything on the line. I'm all in for Trump. I pray that all our Catholic Christians, just the pro-life issue alone, I don't even see how you can consider not voting for Donald Trump. He's the most pro-life president we've ever had in our life versus the most pro-abortion nominee we've ever had. These people literally support abortion through the 9th month, and they want our taxpayer money to pay for it. In New York State, when Governor Cuomo signed a bill allowing abortions through the 9th month and beyond infanticide, he got a standing ovation. These people gave a standing ovation. This is the same Democrat Party that booed God in Obama's convention when they wanted to acknowledge God in their platform. They all booed. So this party, the Democrat Party, is booing God and giving a standing ovation for abortion through the 9th month. The choice could have never been clearer. So again, if you're hearing a lot of this for the first time, you need to tune into Michael Voris' show, Church Militant, The Vortex, and this guy's got a lot of good information. So I want to thank you, Michael. It was a privilege and an honor.
Thank you, Rob.
Having you on. Hopefully we can
right back at you.
So I'm going to say good night. I know you're a super busy man, and God bless.
God bless. Thank you.
I don't know how to shut this off. Sorry.
Well, good. That gives me a chance to remind you about the bang.
You got Root Beer Bang coming at you.
Yeah, I'll take him. If you can manage a third pallet, that'd be great.
The owner of the company always says, if you're not banging, you're not hanging.
I get that. Rob, thanks very much, man.
It was my pleasure. God bless.
All right, give Nick a thumbs up for me. He's going to remind you because he's younger and he's got a sharper mind.
Yes, he will. I forgot we were